right. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Steph, and welcome to Office Hours. This is a series on my YouTube channel about unconventional career paths. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Toronto, where I teach the financial literacy curriculum. And joining me today is Mark McGrath, who is, as of now, semi-retired, but was formerly one of the hosts of the Rational Reminder podcast. He was formerly a financial planner at PWL Capital and father to a 7-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter. He is based in Squamish, BC. He's also the co-author of a new book, which is on my course reading list called Wealthier, The Investing Field Guide for Canadian Millennials, which, as a millennial myself, it was a great resource. It's available on Amazon, and I've linked it in the description below. So thank you so much for joining me, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. No, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so before I begin, I just wanted to say a disclaimer. In this interview, we'll be touching on topics of mental health, self-harm. So I just wanted to provide a trigger warning, as those discussions can bring up traumatic memories for some people. So today, we're going to be talking about how you can set yourself up to retire early, the planning that goes into this, and how to retire with purpose. I'm particularly interested in this topic because I'm currently on maternity leave, and I thought it would be like retirement, but actually it's busier than a full-time job. But it's something a lot of folks are thinking about, especially when their kids are in their formative years. So, Mark, my first question to you is, our generation is prioritizing our mental health and wellness more than ever. And that's really driving the popularity of movements like the FIRE movement or financial independence retire early. Yet the rising cost of living and housing affordability makes it harder to achieve this. For yourself, what prompted your early retirement and how did you start planning for this financially and with your family in mind?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question, and I don't think there's one sort of right answer for everybody. But in my own case, there's kind of a few things that were playing out in my mind all kind of at the same time. Anybody who follows me may have already heard the story about my father, which I wrote about, and he was a small business owner. He owned a tile store, which was not like his life's passion or anything to be a tile salesperson, right? But he just knew that he knew tile when he was younger because he worked for his older brother who owned a tile store and he wanted independence. So he's like, I'm going to start a business. Only thing I know about is tile. So I'm going to start a tile store. It was never really his passion. But he ran that towel store for, geez, it must have been over 25 or 30 years. And his sole goal was financial independence, right? He was very astute with his finances, very, very budget conscious, big on investing and the stock market and that type of thing. And he did quite well for himself. Um, so for him, the business was really just a means to an end, right? He just saw this as here's a way that I can create an income for myself and my family, and then exit that business at hopefully an early age and retire. He was also a super active person, so he would golf extensively. He was a very very good golfer. He would swim. Usually 3 times a week, he would do like 60 to 80 laps in the pool. So he was fit. He was
Wow.
super healthy. Big social network. Big traveler. Loved to travel to Asia in particular. So like had all of the things that we think about of as a fulfilling life and lots of purpose outside of his work. And then when he was 58, he sold his business, and it was like news to us. We went for dinner one day, and he's like, "Surprise! I sold my business. I'm retiring." And so we were obviously thrilled for him, and he went through that transition, and then he just started golfing more and traveling more, and that was great. And he loved that. And then he kind of just got sick of it really, really quickly. Like after 6 months or so, he kind of didn't know what to do with himself or his time. And he actually went back to the people that he sold his tile store to, and he started working for them again for like lunch money, right? Like just kind of a couple $100 here and there. And it wasn't because he needed the money; it was more because he missed the people, he missed the social aspect, and he missed being, in my words, the tile guy, right? Because for our whole lives, he was the tile guy. Like if you were a neighbor of ours or somebody on my baseball team and you needed tile, you knew to go to Rick McGrath. He was the tile
Yeah.
guy. And I think what happened is he didn't really realize how much of his identity had become wrapped up in his business. He was a tile guy. And so when he sold that business, and it was a very just abrupt exit, it was off you go. I think he kind of lost his sense of purpose in a lot of ways. And you can only golf so much and travel so much before you maybe get bored of it or kind of feel empty. And so after about 18 months of this, or over the course of 18 months, I would say his mental health declined significantly.
Mhm.
And it became very evident to us that something was wrong, but he was also very aware of it. Like there was at one point he checked himself into the psychiatric ward at UBC here in BC, because he was recognizing that he was having sort of, dark thoughts and things were not going well for him. But he had the wherewithal to see this, to understand it, to see that it was a risk, and he checked himself into the psych ward. And he found that that wasn't really, in his words, like that was not a place for people like him. It was a place for people with more significant mental health issues. And so he left there, and over time it just got worse and worse and worse. And it culminated in him taking his own life after about 18 months of retirement.
Wow.
And looking back now, it's become very apparent to me that a lot of that was that lack of purpose, that lack of sense of self that he gave up when he got rid of his business. So that was about 10, 11 years ago now. And so that's weighed on me, obviously, for many, many years, that that concern of what do you do with your time, and who are you other than your work. And having worked with physicians for the past similar time period, about 11 years, I see that a lot with the physician community and other professionals as well, right? I mean, you go to school for a long, long time, you train hard, you work long hours, and you're doing a community service in a lot of ways, and you are a physician and you're helping people and you're saving lives. And outside of that, if you're not that, what are you, right? And I've seen, unfortunately, in my own just practice working with doctors, this exact thing
Mhm.
happen where they continue to work until they really maybe shouldn't anymore, but it's because they don't know who they are if they aren't a physician. So that experience from working and seeing people that have gone through it, and of course with my own father, has always been something that I've been not concerned about, but acutely aware of in my own life. And then on top of that, I have, as you mentioned, I have a 7 year old and a 2 year old, and it's just become so apparent to me how important it is for me to be a real big part of their lives, right? And I'm very fortunate that I've been working from home mostly since 2018, so I've always kind of been there. Like I can step out at lunch break and hang out with my kids for a little bit. Um, but I've always been sort of scared that I'm going to look back on my life and then regret that I didn't spend more time with my family.
Mhm.
And so those kind of two, I guess, not competing, but different ideas have been kind of weighing on me. And it just got to the point where I was just like, okay, I need to either do something about this and sort of semi-retire, or I might face that regret later on. So that's kind of where it came from.
Right. And so when you kind of made that decision for yourself, how did you, because of course you and your wife are a partner, right? A partnership.
Yep.
So how did you two kind of talk about this decision? Because it's a big
Mhm.
financial decision. And how did you coordinate
Yep.
things? Is your wife still working right now?
Yeah, so she's been off work. So she's an engineer by through education, and she's worked in like supply chain management and data analytics and that kind of stuff. So she's always had a great career, great education, high earning potential. And about 4 years ago, maybe when my son was 3, before our daughter was born, she decided to basically become a full-time mom. So she hasn't been working for a number of years. She's taken on the occasional contract here and there just to kind of keep her mind um, sharp, and use her skills. But generally, she's been I don't want to say unemployed, but yeah, unemployed, but by choice. So this, like the discussions between my wife and I have been happening over the past, I'd say roughly 2 years. Like we just kind of started talking, but almost joking about it. Saying that we should just retire and travel, and like who cares about the money? Like let's just optimize our time instead of our money and this kind of thing. And we joke about it over dinner. And the more we kind of joked about it, the more we realized maybe one of us isn't joking, or both
Hmm.
of us aren't really joking. Like how serious are you about this? Like could we do it? And then it started to kind of form a plan in our mind where it's like, well, let's take a serious look at this, right? So she was on board from the beginning. And as the financial planner in the family, I've always kind of um, been the one that's really, really in tune with our finances. And for better or worse, she just trusts me implicitly with the family finances. So she just kind of said, like, if you think we can do this, then
Yeah.
then I trust that side of it. But we talked a lot about what's kind of the non-financial aspects of it, right? Like, what does this look like if neither of us are working? Where are we spending our time? And our kids are going to be in school during the day. Like, how are we gonna? What are we gonna do at that time, right? So those discussions started early on, but my wife was on board right from the get-go.
Oh, that's great. And then just I guess since you said you're the financial planner between you two,
Mhm.
um, did you also kind of have like a T minus like 5 years? I have to have this much saved, and then and so on and so forth. Like for example, like if you know that you're going to retire in 2 years, as you said, you were discussing this for
Yeah.
2 years. During those 2 years, did you like get a will, life insurance,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all those kind of things set up?
Yeah, great question. So we had a will, we have life insurance, all of the sort of defensive parts, I would call them, of a financial plan that was already in place, right? Um, so we knew we had a good foundation, like a good financial foundation. So that wasn't too much of a concern. And honestly, it's very strange to me because being a planner and having worked in so many clients' retirement plans, th- this was almost less of a financial decision for us than it was kind of a personal and emotional decision, right? So I didn't run a bunch of retirement projections for us. I didn't run 1,000 Monte Carlo simulations to look
Right.
at worst case scenarios and this kind of stuff. It was more like, okay, we have this amount of money. Our retirement projections, as we've looked at them over the years, have always been really, really good. Can I step away from work full time? Can we spend from the portfolio? And then maybe later on we find a way to generate some income, bring in a couple dollars to kind of pay the bills and that type of thing. And like fortunately, because my wife and I have marketable skills and pretty good network with people, I think it was a relatively low risk decision from that perspective. So it wasn't like this 5 year time horizon where it's like we have to hit A, B, C, and D, and then I can pull the plug. It was like 2 years of talking like, hey, should we do this? Hey, should we do this? And money was largely non-existent from the conversation to the extent that we knew that we'd be okay at least for a few years, and then the portfolio is large enough that if we can bring in some income on the side, maybe to pay the bills, and we can allow the portfolio to compound, and we should be fine from there. But that's like the extent of the financial analysis that I did, which is hilarious to me because I think there's a saying in medicine that I've heard at least that says, physicians are the worst patients. And I've always found that to be true in financial planning as well. Like our financial planners are often the worst clients and we don't get these things lined up. So I just thought it was a kind of ironic that I didn't like overanalyze the retirement decision from a financial standpoint.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing from your answer is that it sounds like you kind of had a lot of these things in place even before the 2 years you really started talking about retiring early. Like you had
Yeah.
said that you had the life insurance in place, and I'm assuming you had like the term life insurance.
Yep. That's
Okay,
right.
and you also had a will already set up in place as well. You
Yep.
kind of know the status or like the vitals of your portfolio, so you already kind
Yep.
of knew what your runway was. And not to
Hmm.
mention, you also know that both of you have marketable skills such that if you were to ever jump back into the workplace part-time, for
Hmm.
example, then you had that leeway.
Yep. That's
Okay.
exactly it. And I think a lot of sound retirement planning is around it's largely the ability to be flexible, right? And I respect that as we get older, that flexibility becomes less possible, like especially getting back into the workforce, right? That's difficult, but even things like being able to reduce our spending. Like we've always been, I don't want to say high spenders, but we like, nice things. And we don't really fret about our budget and our money. Money would come in. I knew how much I wanted to save and could afford to save, and that would get invested automatically in our investment accounts. And we would largely kind of just spend the rest and not think too much about it. So knowing that we have the ability to tone down our expenses if needed, jump back into the workforce, these sort of flexible options for us allows us to kind of be reactive if we need to. Like if markets are really, really bad for a long, long time, the portfolio is not doing good. Okay, let's go get some work, or let's cut our spending. Again, I respect that not everybody can do that, but that flexibility was kind of like a key um, decision making factor.
Got it. And it also sounds because like kids are also very expensive. And I guess
Yeah.
right now, when your kids are toddlers, it might not be as expensive as when they get to university, and that's
Yeah.
even a bigger cost. So it's kind of like once you hit certain milestones, then you guys have that discussion again to determine,
Hmm.
oh, should one of us go back into the workplace or pull more from the portfolio? But you
Yeah,
didn't,
that's just it.
and you
Yeah,
didn't
we've
like
always
plan
had
for your.
RESPs.
Okay, yeah, you had
Yeah.
RESPs. Yeah.
Yeah, and we still do, and of course our kids are young enough, and um, we've contributed to them annually, maxed them out from the government grant perspective,
Yeah.
but we also did what I call super funding RESPs, which is where you kind of front
Like
load
the
some
lump
initial
sum.
contributions, the lump sum in the beginning. And so the year they were born, we added an extra $14,000 for each of them. And of course, markets have been pretty good over the past, 7 or 8 years. So the RESP has grown to a point where should we just let that compound, depending on, the inflation and university costs over the next 10 to 15 years, that alone might be enough to get them through their at least initial 4 year degree type of thing.
Yeah.
So again, we've kind of played defense and being a financial planner set ourselves up in such a way that the financial decisions we've made along the way are now obviously starting to compound. And there wasn't something where like, oh, we missed this big thing and we have to wait until we complete that one task, or we have to contribute more to this account or that account before we can make this work, right? And that's good financial planning, is really getting the big things right early on and along the way, and then kind of just arriving at this place. I think sometimes where it's just like, oh well, everything worked out, and now we can make these decisions.
Yeah, because I guess my hesitancy around retiring early is I have a mortgage to pay, right? And
Mhm.
often I read about fire and people who achieve fire, they have pretty much no debt or very little debt. And
Yeah.
so was that also something like, are you currently still also paying a mortgage as you're retiring, or you made sure like those big things that you mentioned about have been fully paid off before you feel comfortable retiring?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate, and well, I should say we got lucky a number of times just in real estate and that type of thing. And I'm in Squamish, but I lived in Vancouver for many years,
Yeah.
and we were fortunate to have bought a place in Vancouver in 2015 or so, and then when we moved to Squamish, which at the time, which is a much lower cost area for housing,
Mhm.
and sold our place in Vancouver, it was large for the most part enough to pay off the debt for the house that we own now. So we don't have a mortgage. And I think there's two ways to think about it. Like, yes, you don't necessarily want a mortgage going into retirement because there's risk around a mortgage,
Right.
right? Like if we like in the US, you can lock in a mortgage for the
Yeah.
entire duration and you can lock in the interest rate, right? We don't do that in Canada. You can get a 5-year mortgage. I think some banks will offer like 10, right? But there's rate uncertainty and cash flow uncertainty when you have a mortgage. And so going into retirement with a mortgage and then experiencing something like a spike in interest rates, if you have a variable rate or if you're renewing soon, can really mess up your cash flow, right? But at the same time, it's really just a cash flow question. So if you have a portfolio that's large enough that generates enough cash flow, or if you have other sources of income that are enough to generate the cash flow that you would need to service the mortgage and meet your other financial goals, then I don't think it's necessarily the end of the world that you go into retirement with a mortgage, right? Not having a mortgage does reduce your minimum required income that you would need to meet your expenses. But I don't, for me at least, it's not often like a make or break. Like you cannot retire until the mortgage is paid off. I think that's a little bit too strict, and you need to kind of step back and say, like, can we service the mortgage with the cash flow that we have coming in?
Got it. That's often a big question that comes up as well. So it definitely sounds like your father's experience had a big impact on your retirement decision, and you did touch on a bit about how like doctors they don't really know what to do once they're retired because their identity is spent so much on medicine, for example. And this is common with a lot of professional careers who have to
Hmm.
work 60 to 80 hours a week. And so they don't have time to like cultivate hobbies. So as a result, like a lot of doctors, they don't retire at all, or they retire much later than like 65. So
Yeah.
for yourself, how did you prepare yourself to retire with purpose and make time
Hmm.
for those hobbies? Because your dad actually did have hobbies, right? He liked
Yeah.
investing, he liked golfing, he liked
Hmm.
travel. But
Yeah.
I was just wondering, in your experience, how did you prepare yourself?
Yeah, great question. And you're right. And I don't mean to generalize that all physicians face this either, right? Like I have worked obviously with a number of people who are fire-oriented physicians and they've done very, very well and have not, hitched their entire identity to medicine or their professional career.
Yeah.
But I just, again, probably selection bias, but I've worked with a lot of doctors and I have seen that a lot, but I haven't worked with a lot of not doctors. So maybe it's common across everybody. Maybe it's just professionals.
Yeah.
Maybe it's compounded by the fact, to your point, that you work 60 to 80 hours a week, but you've also spent, 8, 10, 12, 15 years on your education. And there's
Yeah.
kind of a sunk cost there, I think, right? It's like, well, I spent 15 years and $300,000 on my education. I can't just give that up, right? I
Yeah.
have to continue to do it and continue to do it. But in my case, I think there's a few things going. One, my kids right now are kind of everything, right? You mentioned you're on
I'm
maternity
on mat
leave.
leave.
So
Yeah.
you're on mat leave. Is your child born or are you waiting?
Yeah.
Like, did you take mat leave
Child's
already?
already
Okay.
born. I was
Okay.
actually afraid that she was going to be crying really loudly in the other room.
Oh,
But luckily, I
no.
have my parents helping me out today so that there's
Nice.
not like crying in the background of this
Yeah,
interview.
yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Yeah, and so, is it your first child?
First child.
First child. Okay. Well, first of all, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Um, Second of all, yeah, I think you'll likely notice this as well as your children kind of get older and develop their own personality. Um, they just like you're everything to them. Like you're
Yeah.
their entire world. And as they begin to be able to kind of voice things and talk more, and they develop this personality, hopefully you realize they're so much fun, right? And so for me, my identity and purpose right now is just kind of making sure that I'm being there for them and being a good dad, and we're giving them the experiences and the education and the tools that they need to be good kids. Um, but I think the other thing in my case that I'm very fortunate is that I'm able to still stay involved in the financial planning community despite being, semi-retired, so to speak. I'm still involved with the Financial Planning Association of Canada, or FPAC. So I'm the treasurer for that organization. I still intend to create a lot of educational content and write more, maybe do some video and some YouTube and that type of thing. So I'm able to kind of still stay in the industry, but on my own terms and
Mhm.
not have to necessarily work to generate an income right now. And maybe that'll change in the future. So I'm able to kind of still have my financial planner identity, my public identity, uh, based around financial planning while being semi-retired. And I've got my kids to focus on right now, right? And so that I don't know how that will change over time is the kind of scary thing, right?
Right.
As I get older and my kids don't want to hang out with me anymore, that sort of parenting purpose might dissipate. And what am I going to do then? Am I going to go back and work full time because my identity is still wrapped up in financial planning and I'm having trouble letting that go? That remains to be seen, I think. But I think a lot of it's not just about hobbies. I think it's about being useful. It's about having a purpose and being useful to people. And that doesn't have to be like paid work. That can be volunteering. That can be just helping people out. That a lot of people are involved in religious organizations and they can spend time there in their community doing that. Educating people is another one. So it's beyond like I could just sit here and play guitar all day. And I've always
Yeah.
joked that if you leave me on a desert island with a guitar and enough strings, then I'd be happy for the rest of my life. And I don't know if that's true or not, right? It's easy to think that, yeah, if I'm a golfer, then as long as I can golf every day, I'm good. But when you get there and you've got that time, I think often will feel different. So for me, it's kind of less about the hobbies and making sure that I'm being useful and helpful to, of course, my family, but then to the financial planning community.
Yeah, and I think you make a really important distinction there because playing golf or traveling, eventually it's fun in the beginning, but then eventually over time you kind of adapt to it and it's no longer as exciting. But
Mhm.
then the difference is how can you translate something that you really enjoy doing, like for example, for me making videos into
Yeah.
something that might be useful content for people. You also touched on another point earlier in your answer, which was regarding retirement guilt, because you did say a lot of doctors spend a lot of money to go through medical education. They take 10 years of their life or more to become a doctor, and they don't want to just give it up. And they
Mhm.
feel kind of guilty because you don't want to leave patients without a family doctor, for example.
Of course.
Or just like for yourself, you don't want to leave your clients after helping them for this many years. How
Yeah.
do you overcome that guilt of retiring?
Yeah, that I think is really, really tricky. And I was very fortunate because one of the things that made my own decision a lot easier was knowing that my clients would be taken care of by my previous employer, PWL Capital, and knowing how good the work is and how good the work PWL does for their clients and just how great they are made it really, really easy for me knowing like if I leave, my clients are just going to work with another great advisor over at PWL Capital. I know they'll be very, very well cared for, right? Like even my mom is still a client at PWL and I told her, look, like, doesn't matter what happens to me, like you need to stay a client at PWL. So that made it really easy. And in my industry, that's not always the case. My industry is quite fractured. There's a lot of kind of like smaller practices that don't really have a great succession plan. And so we experience in our industry the same thing where we have advisors working probably past their kind of due date, so to speak, their expiry date, because
Mhm.
they don't really have a way to hand their clients off to somebody who can just kind of carry the torch, right? And especially with something like family practice in Canada right now, it, there's just not really an option, right? It's not like, oh, just go to this, big medical
Yeah.
corporation that has these great doctors and they don't have a wait list and you can just like we're all fighting to find family physicians, right? So I think it's really difficult and I don't know that there's a great answer for that. And I hope over time we attract more family doctors and that problem maybe is lessened. But I can totally respect how difficult it would be to just kind of hang up your license, shut the door, and you've got 1,000 patients and they've got
Yeah.
nowhere to go. That's really, really difficult emotionally and psychologically as a physician to deal with. Um, I do think for some people there's maybe a little bit of a need to be kind of selfish at times though, right? Like I always say that at the end of the night it's just you and your pillow. Like it doesn't matter if you have a spouse or a family or a great social network or a career or colleagues, it's kind of you against the world at the end of the day. And you have to make decisions that are right for you and your family a lot of the times. And sometimes that means continuing to work and serve these patients. And sometimes it means just no, that's not the right thing for me and my own mental health and my own goals. And I'm going to have to step away or finding some kind of transition plan. But at the end of the day, you have to make that decision. And I don't know that there's an easy solution there, but you should prepare yourself mentally. And if you can prepare your patients for it, um, yeah, it's a really tough situation, I think, with the medical situation in Canada, especially around family medicine.
So that was part one of our two-part conversation about early retirement. What really resonated for me was the importance of diversification. It doesn't just apply to your investments, but also how you spend your time. Investing your time across multiple identities, not just your work identity, but also your identity as a spouse or parent, such that once one role ends, you'll still have that relational capital built up to spend with your spouse or family in retirement. The other key takeaway was that Mark didn't just plan for retirement right before retiring. There were things he set up over the years, such as getting a will or staying on top of your financial situation, such that retiring became more of an emotional decision rather than a financial decision. And sometimes getting emotionally ready for retirement might mean putting your own mental or physical health first before your health forces you to retire at a time when you may not be ready. In the next part, we will be discussing whether there is a retirement number for how much you need to have saved to retire, which order of accounts to draw money from first, RRSPs, as well as investment products used in retirement. See you in the next video.